I don't think that between all the situations I'm something. Like I'm not something. I feel like I'm not something behind, the theories I made about life and the language and the experiences. Like if you cut everything out, there's like a vacuum. Like there's like, shitting, drinking thing, which I totally don't identify with.
I'm Freddie Lancia,
I'm Julian.
and this is the Post Definitions Podcast. So, we are back talking about identity, new perspectives, and after a long break, this is going to be a sick episode. Let's dive in. Julian, I met you a few years ago when we were both traveling, when we were both wee little babies. You were a slightly larger baby. Being a little older, I was just traveling for the first time when I was 19, and we were leading summer camps, teaching English to Italian kids, leading the kids to foosball victory or calcio. And you said a little something about how traveling has influenced your identity, has given you an opportunity to explore. Can you talk a little bit about that experience?
Thank you for the question, Freddie. And thank you for inviting me. I was really curious how this would be. It's my first interview ever. But anyway, I wouldn't say that this traveling formed my identity a lot. It was more the first time in my life I felt that I have something like identity, or better, I felt myself as a subject after all this time being with friends and in school and family, and the first time in my life I was disconnected from that, and I felt like how other people who never met me or ever any people from my context or from my town, meeting them, it was perfect me to mirror myself, to see the reflection of myself in the world, or what happens when I come into another's life, something like this. And the identity change, if you want to call it like this, me changing, it happened, of course, while traveling. But I think this first journey in Italy was more about what is actually there, what do I bring with my travelings, what bring I with me, and what is defining me already. Yes.
So you felt like you could distinguish between when you go out into the world and you talk to people, you could see how you change the world by being there, but you never could see what the world is like when you're not there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Except for through maybe movies and stuff, or hearing stories from other people. How did you sort of learn about the way that you were impacting the world around you?
I didn't felt like I'm impacting the world a lot at that time. I just felt that there's the certain situation where I'm there and the other person is there, or the environment is there, and things are happening because we both meet in a way. But I felt it's more that it's not about that something it's impacting another thing. It's more that something arises which was not there in the before at all. If this is answering your question, I didn't felt at that time a lot of my aim was not impacting someone or something. I really felt like a lot of joy in seeing myself in situations, or like experiencing myself in situations.
Like you had a bunch of questions of like, what would I do in this hypothetical situation? But you would never know the answer until you would
Exactly.
be there.
And I think it's also the positive as the negative space. Like, you know, leaving your family and your friends. It's so the one side of the coin is meeting yourself in a different situation in a different country with like people. But the other side is of the coin is hearing about your absence, or like, you're not being in the place where you always were, you know. And I think there the impact was much stronger. So I really learned about that not being there. It's like, you know, it formed, for example, my parents' lives a lot, or like after I moved out of the house, I felt like their life changed so much because I was not there. You know, I was not being this stone in the river who, you know, changed how water flows, but I put myself out after being so many years in. And so, yeah, I feel like the not being there, like the absence, is like most of the time, for at least for me, changing the environment so much more than the being there.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I always hear people talk about things like they left home and they realized, oh wow, like those friends that I thought were friends were not real friends. Like they're always saying like, oh, like everything kept going without me, or they're saying things like, oh, time moves so still back home, because they leave and they come back and everything is the same as it was, whereas they feel like they changed so much. But that's a slightly different topic.
I mean, in the end, it's not like when I come here, I feel like nothing changed. You know, like not a lot of things changed. Like, I don't know. In the end, also my brother left and my cat died. You know, all these things which were like really strong stabilizers in my family environment. But in the end, like when you come there, I feel like everyone is doing their best to recreate exactly the situation which was there, you know, before these changes came. So I feel like coming back and then saying nothing changed is like, I don't know, it doesn't make sense, because, you know, it's all about recreation. It's about like going to visit your family on Christmas every year, yeah, you know. So the change is there when you're not there, kind of this, you know.
Like you miss the change. You can't
like
see it because you come back, and then of course it resumes because you're back.
Yeah, because also like I think like you are the perspective which then comes into this life, you know, and you know you see the things maybe slightly different, but also a lot how you saw them before. So, yeah.
Yeah, interesting. So, what kind of new sides to yourself did you see when you traveled?
I think the biggest thing what I learned like while in my first months of traveling was how good I was, or I felt like I was really good in like interacting with all kinds of people. Like I really felt myself like fluid, if you want to say, and I experienced this before in my school time, where I was like friends with like many kind of, you know, different people, different groups, social groups. I think that in the end it's a pretty hard question, because I don't have like this you know, this really strong memory of like who or where I was before, how I said before, you know, like I just experienced myself. So I could maybe, the question would be much easier to now talk about like what I was after the journey and now, or something like this, you know. But while traveling, I was really just understanding, or like seeing parts which were there before. So, for example, how good it felt to meet people and interact with them, and how easy things start to grow, like relationships. Like, we both did work away. So in this context, it's there like really you have some time, like a couple of weeks or a month or two, to really build something up, like a working relationship, but also like a relationship between people who never met before. And I was in the beginning, and I still am always surprised how fast you can like reach a certain state where if it feels like the other person forever, like how fast it goes to create like this feeling of infinity. Like, I don't know how it was before I met you, or like I don't know how it was before I came to this place. So I was really surprised how fast the past fades away in a way. Like how fast you really can. I felt like I could like just accomplish to be fine with the place where I am, and start to understand these systems. Yeah. So it was like Anpassungsfähigkeit, which I now missed the English translation. It's about, how maybe I can describe it like an animal, when it comes to a different environment, or like a group of animals, like a kind, and they have to change because, for example, now earth warming and stuff like this, they need to adapt. So it was it made the ability to adapt to a new environment. That's what surprised. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. I always have this kind of perception that at times people are making fun of me for being able to make friendships so quickly. They're like, oh, this guy just makes a friendship, and you're like, oh, I love them so much, and they're like, it's not a real friendship, something like this. Do you have that experience where other people are not really believing that you could have made such close friendships in such a short time?
No, not really.
No.
Like, and I think in the end it's like I in the most of the time I keep these things kind of separate. Like, I don't come here to Germany and I talk a lot about like the things what happen and the people I meet. I think that's just something I don't do a lot. No.
Yeah, fair. Why do you think that friendships can be formed so quickly, specifically when you're traveling, whereas you haven't had that experience as much in Germany, or you could say at home?
I think it has like a couple of reasons for me. Like, maybe one of the more important reason is that, when you have like a friendship growing in like an environment where you are for years, then it's likely that you meet the other person like in certain situations. Like, for example, a lot of my friends here I met like while partying, or like going to festivals, or in school. So I feel like so the situations where you meet the other person and where you start to understand or like to experience the other person in combination with your being, it's like while traveling you meet this other person like in so many more states. It's easier to not hide things. I mean, you can also say it's hard to hide things, but for me it was also always a good thing, like an ability that it's not easy to hide things.
Because
so
you spend all your
like
time
by
with them.
natural you come into situations where you would maybe at home have hidden things, wouldn't you show something, but then it doesn't work while you are traveling because the circumstances doesn't allow you to now go away and come back on another day with like a smile again, but you have to show you that you are like I don't know, sad or like upset because you're there and there's no other room where you can go, like less private space.
Yeah. Less privacy, and also you rely on each other more because you're all alone.
It's true.
Yeah. And I guess relying on people is a pretty big part of friendship. Like being vulnerable. And what about before you started traveling, I asked you about what your perception of faraway places was when you were young, and you said the thing that really differentiated places from your home in Germany was the language barrier. You said that Italy seems as far away as the United States because both of them have the same distance in terms of language. Can you say a little bit more about that and how that changed and how that impacted traveling, and also how language impacts your identity?
At first, like of course, like it's this common thing that as a child you experience the things which are surrounding you, like in this case the world, with all the countries and stuff like this, so much larger than you do it now, So what happened there is that it's impossible to see the world. Like the world is like a universe. Like this planet is huge, and because the places by themselves, they didn't create like a lot of connections. However, if the language thing, everything was a thing by itself, and so I think that's what I meant with like everything had the same distance, because everything was like 100% separated from the other thing. So there was this infinity distance, or like at least, or like just no distance, because they were like I couldn't relate, like the USA to Italy, or like Germany to Italy, like all these possible relationships, which I could build up now, through education and through like meeting other people. They were not existing at that time, and also that's why also the couldn't know about my own language and how it forms how I see the world, because I couldn't really understand, of course, at that time what it means to speak in a language and to think in a language. That really changed, I think, with my first trip to the USA, where my uncle was living at that time, and the first time I was dreaming in English, for example, which was really strange for me. Did this answer your question? I feel like the language thing, you could talk forever, but
yeah. No, it's really interesting. So now you have a perception of how speaking German influences your thoughts and your perception.
Yeah, for sure. Like in the last few years, I was really started to become really interested into languages, and also about the different ideas, how we started to form languages, and there's so many different theories about how it all started, and like for example, one I really like is that language is based on we as humankind trying to imitate the world, like to let the world speak through us, like like you are in a forest and you do bird sounds or something like this, and I don't know. I think in that, if that's true, or if this is close to what how language are were born, then there's maybe the similarity between all of the languages, that they were all kind of a way, like when they were really close to their beginning. I think they were all pretty same, but then you have like sometimes 1,000 years or like many thousand years of abstraction, and these things fade away and they become really they get into really interesting patterns and stuff. So yeah, and yeah, I'm really curious. Like, I don't know a lot of languages, like a little Italian and German and English, but I already know that I'm a different person when I speak now in English than I speak when I'm in German, obviously.
Can you explain a little bit more what kind of is different about you in English versus German?
I think it's in general it's just less likely that I get into phrases, like get into how you say, like old metaphors which I invented or someone else invented and which I would just replicate as something which I don't understand anymore. So because of the limited vocabulary, it's all about maybe finding new combinations which work for the thing you want to speak out. So I think like when I'm speaking English, it's a much more active process, and at least when I'm speaking it, I feel like when I'm like speaking English is like writing German for me, in a way that I have the same curiosity to explore what I want to say, or like what I want to let the other person feel or understand.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's the first time I ever heard, like, I know you didn't use any words that expressed that you think that's a positive thing, but I find that quite positive, that you have to find new ways of saying the sentiment you're trying to express, like the way that you didn't know how to say adapt, and you tried to find a way to explain that. It means that there's going to be less miscommunication, because you have to just explain more and not rely on like your connotation of a phrase and someone else's. And I think using more words to say something it's gonna express a more accurate meaning, right?
Yeah, I 100% believe in metaphors. Like, for me, they're like the core of any communication and any kind of like making sense out of the world. So that's what I meant with active. When you like build metaphors in a conversation, like, or like in a writing, for me that's like the most active part you can be as a narrator or something like this.
Metaphors more than explanation.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think metaphors definitely have more room for miscommunication.
I mean, they 100% have like the biggest. But I think they have, especially when you, for example, I would now use like a metaphor, like a standard saying in German, and it would translate it in how many people do, and like this more really famous thing which everyone finds funny, and I found, I don't know, just stupid. Like, it's not a yellow from the egg, It's nicht das Gelbe vom Ei. And there you have like a really well down saying, a metaphor for like something which is not really nice. and if you translate it, it doesn't work at all. Like, people find it funny, but they don't understand. And I think you also don't understand it anymore in your own language. Like, you don't know where it's coming from. But if you like if you communicate, and we try to find metaphors which are born, or which are getting birth in the moment we are talking. Like, I think we can really find metaphors together. Like, this is what an amazing conversation makes to a amazing conversation is that like it's possible to find the translations of what is together, and it's not as like I don't think it has to be like a single person thing. It can be a two-person thing for sure too.
Yeah. And sometimes it's really easy to communicate with someone from your culture because you have those shared metaphors already and so on. But sometimes you really can discover something because two people from different cultures are putting in the effort to communicate, and you're going to find that overlap, or you find something new by creating a bridge between you to communicate. I always find that very interesting. There's like, it's like takes more effort, I guess, to talk to someone from a different culture, but it can be more rewarding because you have a lot more to teach each other, and then it's really satisfying to communicate something through that.
Yeah, and some metaphors, like, they're amazing. Like, it really, like, sometimes you met a person from our cultural background, and she's or he is translating a metaphor in your language, and you feel like, oh wow, this opened like a new, totally new world, a new perspective. And some don't work at all. So it really depends. But I think in general, like, with learning another language is also learning like so many new metaphors.
So speaking of misunderstood sayings, there's a common thing that people are always saying, and that's finding your true self. And I think that you expressed a little bit of skepticism of this phrase because you're not sure if there is a true self, or if there is, aren't we always that true self? Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
So maybe I get into it with the story, how we started to talk about this. Like,
yeah, sure.
When I was like watching the video you on working right now, and you were making a video about yourself being, it's getting released soon.
Get excited.
Being you being in Sydney, or what was the exact words?
Who am I in the streets of Sydney?
Yeah. So it was formulated as a question. So, and I was like getting, like, I felt like a little, like, I don't know, uncomfort when I always feel this when people, like, talking about unreveal your true self, connect to your true self and all this. Like, I always I think it's always that I have like this pictures in my mind of like a speaker in a room who's talking like to thousands of people to get their money out, and I know that for sure there can be like also the opposite, but for me, that I don't know what I want to say is like the idea of a true self is like, for me, at least a thing which I want to question, because how is that before, like, when I was talking about my first travelings and stuff like this, I didn't feel like I was exploring, or like I was getting closer to my true self, but I was like experiencing interactions between me and the environment, or me and between people, and I felt like that the people we met, the moment we met was also the moment where something appeared, and I don't felt like I was like a digger of my of my own personal background or like my identity. I felt more like something appears.
You're like creating.
Yeah, not it's, I wouldn't say. Now it sounds like a little like really spiritual, but I wouldn't say like I created the situations, but the universe was creating these situations. Like,
yeah, it's like if you're a chemical reacting with other chemicals, and you weren't gonna be that thing that you became without those other, without those new potions.
Yeah. I just found recently out in a book I was reading about Karen Barrett. She's a quantum physics, and I don't have any like a lot of ideas about this, but she's talking not about interactions but interactions, and I'm really amazed by this idea that the things appear when two things meet, and then that's the moment where like physicality in the first moment comes into the world. So before that's just potentials.
What is her distinction between interactions and interactions?
How I understood it, it's like interactions, it would be like two physical objects meeting each other and creating a situation.
Hello. That they'd be like two rocks coming together and
kind
be
of
like, hello,
this,
it's nice to meet you. Tell me about your life. Oh, that's very nice. Okay, bye-bye.
Yeah.
That's an interaction.
That's an interaction. And an interaction, how I understood, is like two potentials meeting and creating a rock. So I think just the opposite is that it's the opposite. So like the physicality is there in the moment of meeting.
Okay, so they together create something that could not have existed before. It's not like one lock. It's like most people, how I would normally picture an interaction is that it'd be like two rocks. One comes and like paints on the other a little bit, and then this one paints on the end, and then they go their separate ways, and they left their mark on each other, but they're still their separate entities.
Yeah.
But you say when they come together, they are now the uber rock, and then when they leave each other, they are not that thing doesn't exist anymore. But when they were together, they were a couple. They were a thing.
Exactly. Like that's why I also like the title of your movie, or like what you're always saying in the movie is like, who am I in the streets of Sydney? Like I really found this an interesting concept to relate the own feeling of personality or identity on the place you are. I think that makes a lot of sense. And then I was like a little confused why you didn't kept up with this concept, and then you went back, in this concept of like an identity, which is in the back of reality or something, and I think in that point maybe we can meet again, because it's this hyper reality which could in another city or another day, and you are someone else. But I don't know. I in the end we were I said maybe you could also say I am Sydney, and then we were like discussing about this, and you said no, I'm not Sydney, because it would be like a little potentials to say things like that.
Yeah, I said that I think of it as like two Venn diagrams where there's Sydney and there's me, and there's a certain time, 6 months, where we overlap, where I'm in Sydney, and there's a certain part of Sydney that I saw, but I didn't even see the whole thing. Yeah. So you could say that I am a part of Sydney during that time and place, and then you could say that Sydney is part of me, since I saw and not even all of Sydney, but a part of Sydney is part of me, right? Yeah. That's what I would say. Yeah. But you could see it differently.
Yeah. I think just the thing is that I don't think that there's like all this other Sydneys existing in that moment. There's like your perspective on Sydney, and you're creating it. So it's like getting like a physicality object, you being in Sydney, and I think at that point you can't even separate Sydney as the thing you're exploring and yourself anymore. So, and that's I think that's something what traveling teaches me, and what I'm really grateful to understand, because it's really liberating. In the one moment it's like really, it scares me, like because you lose a little the foot on your ground if you believe in things, if you believe that the world is like this, and it's like everything is spontaneously, and like you like this this chaos of vitality. But in the same moment I think it's like a really concept which can give give hope, because it puts you in a situation where you where it could be really a aim to look for new interactions.
So what you're saying is that traveling taught you that there is sort of yourself, and then there's yourself interacting with a new place and a new place and a new place, and you can be so many things, and that can be kind of scary because yourself is so fluid and it's hard to know who you really are. But it's also very exciting because you can see new things you can be, and you can be
sorry
new
to
things.
interrupt you, but I don't think that between all the situations I'm something. Like I'm not something. I feel like I'm not something behind, the theories I made about life and the language and the experiences. Like if you cut everything out, there's like a vacuum. Like there's like, shitting, drinking thing, which I totally don't identify with.
So you're nothing without those interactions, almost.
Yeah, and I'm not. I mean, the interaction. There's also interaction you can have with yourself. And I think this is the most painful one. And in that moments when you have like an interaction with yourself, which is a really weird concept. But if you when you feel like your own existence, and you are in the moment, and you also feel like, what does it? You are confronted with this question: what does it mean? To have like to meet myself, like. How can I, survive this interaction or this interaction with myself without getting totally crazy? Then what helps me is that I could totally meet other thing and not myself. But sometimes it's really important from time to time to have like this interaction with yourself, for sure. I think now it's getting really into areas which I don't understand anymore and which are like kind of complex for me. But what I want to say is that I don't feel like that there's something Julian between things happening, in interactions happening. So I'm really like just amazed by this word, because it answers so many questions for me, how I always felt, and now I know I have a word for it.
Yeah, really interesting. Do you think that you ever come across other people trying to explain this idea of meeting themselves, and what that usually comes out as? Like, what is the most typical way that a person in your life would try to talk about this idea of meeting themselves?
I mean, I really felt like that it is a big topic for you, and I think it's a big topic for like especially spiritual people, like for like people who meditate or doing yoga, or like trying to, be fine with the world, and trying, I think it's also really deeply connected with like pain and stuff like this. So, and it's not like, I'm not struggling with this. Like in the end, I'm waking up and I meet myself, And sorry, what was the question?
I was just wondering if you had any sense of how other people talk about what it's like to meet themselves. Because it's like a pretty abstract concept that I feel like people probably do try to speak about in like everyday terms. But I'm not sure what that looks like.
I think when people like the closest what comes for me, like when people are trying or like talk about this, it's like when they're talking about meditation and about really focusing on the moment and time and space and what they are there. So like when probably like understanding that a lot of things which the daily life think they exist doesn't exist if you're like getting a little more calm.
Yeah. when people slow down, they talk about spending more time with themselves and doing reflecting and writing and meditating.